Today's episode is sponsored by Audible. With an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more, get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial at audible.com/shoptalklive. Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host, Ben Strano, and with me this week are Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
And Matt Kenny.
Hello, everyone.
Behind the camera is Jeff Rose.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jeff.
And today we have Taylor Engels.
Hey.
Helping out.
How's it going?
All right, so we need to let everyone know about the Lee Valley Hand Tool Month giveaway.
Why? Because
they only have like 3 days left when this is airing.
But the more people that enter, the less chance I have of winning.
You cannot win regardless.
You won't know that it's me.
Mike, you already have all those hand tools.
Yeah, that would...
Several times over.
Yeah.
You don't need them anymore.
Yeah, I think in the shop we have your spare. Now Veritas Mark II Honing Guide is going to be an inside joke here after Tom's episode last time. Veritas.
There's nothing funny about a Mark II marking gauge.
But yeah, so head on over to finewoodworking.com/sweepstakes. And you can enter to win. We're giving away with Lee Valley Veritas a number 4 smoother, the deluxe Mark II Honing Guide set of 3 joinery saws, a large shoulder plane, and a low angle block plane.
Wow.
I mean, that's a kit right there.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Pretty much. That was the idea.
That and a 12-inch joiner and a 20-inch planer and a 20-inch bandsaw and a nice table saw, slider.
A sliding table saw.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah, whatever. All right, should we get to questions?
We absolutely should, Benjamin.
All right. Let's see. This one is from Amy. And I have been working on a small box. The box is primarily made of Jarrah. I hesitate when I say that because I don't know if it's Jarrah or Jarrah because I'm not Australian.
I think it's Jarrah.
With a basswood stripe that runs around the whole box. I started finish sanding the glued up parts. I noticed that the red Jarrah dust is turning my basswood pink. This isn't an issue on the outside of the box where I'm carving away the pink surface of the basswood, but the bottom of the lid is noticeable. The parts are already at their final thickness, so I don't want to remove a ton of material to get rid of the pink sand. Is there anything I can do to get rid of the pink stain? Is there anything I can do to get the red dust out of the basswood's pores?
Well, I mean, first of all, you're probably not going to make it worse. So just try anything. Like, first, try blowing it out with a compressor. Probably won't work. Try getting it out with, say, mineral spirits. Like wiping it probably won't work.
Then milk paint it.
Then just milk paint it, and it'll work. It'll be beautiful. So we don't really know what kind of lid this is, right? Like, is it a lid that sits in a rabbet? We do. Yeah. It's a lid that looks like it sits in a rabbet,
It does.
Right?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes.
Okay. So
Planing is a possibility.
Planing is.
Because there's no edge.
Right, because you could hand plane it. And I would say if that's a lid that sits in a rabbet, it looks like it's about 3/16 to a 1/4 inch above the sides.
Yes.
I would be comfortable if it were 1/8 of an inch or to 3/16 personally. So I would just hand plane away some of the thickness and get rid of the pink color.
How much do you take off when you hand plane?
Well, I would not have made it that thick to begin with, but I'm saying, I think on that box, which has the lid is quite proud, you could make it less proud and it would still look really nice. So you could hand plane it. And just
but if you hand plane the bottom, that doesn't really affect the reveal on the top, though.
Yeah, it would.
No,
if it's a flat piece sitting in a rabbet.
I'm just assuming the lid is grooved around all edges and it fits in a groove in the box sides.
Oh, see, I think it's...
So it's like partially overlapping
that is
the
just
sides?
the top.
That's right. See, no, that's not just the top.
No.
That's the whole box. I thought the lid came out of the rabbet.
So what you're saying is if it sits in a rabbet, you plane the bottom, it gets a little bit shorter. Who cares?
Yeah.
And even if it fits in a groove, if you hit it with a hand plane, you're just taking off a couple thou. That's not really going to affect your fit too much.
No, it won't. It won't affect the fit at all if you take
Yeah.
it off the bottom of the box, because the only thing that affects the fit of the lid will be the grooves.
Yes.
And if you were to take it off the top edge of the box, that would affect the fit.
I don't think you're going to mess up the fit too much if you hit it with
you're
a
not.
hand plane.
You're not.
I think anytime, like a lot of times when you're inlaying like holly and ebony stringing on a fancy piece of federal furniture, they always tend to scrape it just because the dust will sort of get into the holly. So anytime you can avoid sanding with contrasting woods, I think you're better off that way.
Or you could, I know a guy who would shellac his inlays and his stringings first.
Yeah.
And then he would do surface prep, like sanding and so forth.
Right.
Oh, because then even if something gets in the pores,
It's kind of
It's not
already
gonna
sealed.
stick.
Yeah.
okay.
So, but obviously basswood is like way too soft to scrape. You're just going to tear it up. So I think a hand plane is fine. The other thing you can do is when you're done, just sort of glue in and attach either a piece of wood or some sort of liner on the underside of the lid just to hide your stripe.
So turn it into a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or hide it completely with, a feature.
Well, I mean, she's got this beautiful chip carving on the
Yeah,
top.
it's
You could
awesome.
chip
Yeah.
carve the bottom of the lid, and
Right. And here's the other thing about boxes. When you're making it, you worry about that. No one looks at the underside of a lid.
unless you point it out to them, which you will probably do.
You lift up the lid. That's in one hand. You want to see what's inside the box.
But by coincidence, just oddly enough,
Put some candy in there.
I know. Yeah, if you put candy in there, no one's going to look at it. But she lives close to. I happen to know this because she follows me on Instagram, and I think I follow her on Instagram. She lives close to an author that I work with all the time. So the next time I'm out there, I'm going to go and I'm going to pick up the look at this box, and I'm going to look to see if she cleaned up the underside, and then I'll report back to everybody.
Watch out, Amy. Bad's coming.
One thing you could do if you wanted to keep in theme with the Jara, you could get some Vegemite wrappers from Australia and line the underside of the lid with Vegemite wrappers.
That's good.
That would be
Some
fantastic.
decoupaged Vegemite wrap.
Yes. Yeah. No. I would probably I would get a nice paper, I think, instead of fabric here. I think paper would look nice. And just scrape it down, sand it down if it's too thin. If you don't like that, put some paper on there and then glue it up. It'll look nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next time, shellac it before you sand it.
And also, awesome chip carving. No one's going to pay attention to anything.
The chip
other than
carving is
that.
fantastic.
No, her chip carving is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Let's see. This one is from Christian. My shoulder planes come with a blade that is slightly wider than the plane body. Should I grind the plane thinner? If so, how is it best to do this? What are your preferences with shoulder plane setup?
You gotta fatten up the hand plane a little bit.
Just add to it.
Just add to the hand plane. Just weld on some plate.
But thicker than you need, and then take it down to the ideal thickness.
We're not being helpful at all.
Your blade needs
Why
to be a
start
little
now?
bit wider than the body. Hopefully, it's not too much. I mean, if you're a 16th wider, that's way too much. But you should be able to feel it. So when it's perfectly centered in the body, and you run your fingers or thumb along the sides, it should stick out a hair.
So just enough that you can feel it. So a few thou.
Yeah, just a little bit on each side.
Yeah, because the way it works, you're supposed to be able to cut into a corner, and if the blade doesn't extend past the body, you're never getting into the corner, and you're going to end up with a wonky sidewall if you take too much stuff off.
It'll sort of come in and in and in and in with each pass.
Yeah, and if you're trying to trim the cheek of a tenon, you're going to end up with a taper because you're really not taking anything off of that right at the base of the tenon.
Right.
It's in essence not cutting. So it's got to stick out a little bit. Even if it sticks out maybe a little bit more than you want, on my plane I would say, yeah, maybe that's the case, but I can sort of like squish it over. So if I'm using the right-hand side of the plane for the majority of the time, I can just kind of get the blade over so it's just barely sticking out on the side I want it. If it's sticking out a little more on the other side, or even if it's shy on the other side,
Who cares?
It's still going to work. So
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you're right-handed, most of the time you will be cutting on the left-hand side of the plane. And so if it's always set up so the left-hand side of the blade sticks out a little bit, then that's fine. And it's the opposite if you're left-handed. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Sure.
I mean, if you're trimming a rabbet,
and the
you would
grain
be
is
on the
going
right.
in a certain way, then
Yeah.
sometimes you have to go in a certain direction.
Yeah, but not all, you can usually get away with it.
Yeah.
And you would just play in the way you would have the board oriented so it's natural for you to use your right hand, and so that means that the blade's going to probably be on the left.
But in an ideal, perfectly set up shoulder plane, you spend a week setting up a shoulder plane, let's say. So you've got it perfect. Would you have it sticking out on both sides?
Yeah.
Tooth out.
Yeah, ideally.
Now
And
I did it again.
Chris
I don't know about
Gochner,
tooth owl, but
he did a shoulder plane article where he did some tune-up, and the way he does it is he just gets a blade in the plane, lays it on its side. I don't know if he used coarse sandpaper or diamond plate or something like that. I'm going to say maybe like 220 sandpaper. He laid down 2 pieces of paper fore and after the blade, laid the plane on top of that, so the plane is resting on the paper. So as he sort of abrades away the part of the blade that's sticking out, as you get down and the sides reach the little paper, then you end up with a paper width protrusion of the blade.
yeah.
Okay.
It's really a minimal amount. That, by the way, is not Chris
I know.
Gochner.
Well,
showing.
I was gonna.
That's Phil Lowe.
I was going to talk about Phil Lowe's shoulder plane article, who does it a little bit differently.
He does.
He,
Yeah.
In fact, he
Scribes
was holding my shoulder plane because I thought the blade was a little bit too wide. So I said, give Phil my plane. And in the article, he can demonstrate how to get it down just right. And he
All right,
looked
Christian.
at it.
So
And he said,
what you need to do
this
is become
fine.
art director of a magazine.
But the one thing you want to make sure if you shift the blade over like that, Mike, make sure that the cutting edge still remains parallel to the mouth.
Right, yeah.
You don't want to get it skewed because then you'll also end up with tapered parts.
Yes.
Tapered in
But
thickness.
you're not worried about the edge of the blade being perpendicular to the mouth, though.
A lot
Just
of
as
times
long
they're
as
slightly
that
tapered,
cutting edge.
Yeah,
is,
it's actually might taper back in thickness a little bit. So
But
that
as long
it's-
as that cutting edge is coming out a little bit
Yeah.
from the shoulder. Okay.
yeah.
While you're flat along the bottom, parallel along the bottom.
Okay.
Yep.
Right on. So check out. I'll post a link to Gochner's article.
But
and
really, you should
Phil
just
Lowe's.
really should just buy another one and hope that one is more to his liking.
Well, he actually used plural. My shoulder planes.
So
it
buy
makes me
some,
think he's
just
got
buy
like
some
a
more
set.
planes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could have a full set for right-handed
And a
use,
full set for left-handed.
use.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
That's only 6, right?
That's the prudent
Small,
thing to
medium,
do.
and large in 2 different setups.
Yeah.
I don't see the problem with that.
No.
Just
Mike's
then
almost
you
there.
can make your very own, like it have its own little toolbox, with just your shoulder planes in there. You could make it out of ebony and cocobolo
And Jara.
and jara and holly and purple heart,
On that note.
birdside maple.
All right, let's move on to our all-time favorite tool of all time for this week. Matt, I loaded your pictures in this time.
Okay. So mine is a 1-inch Lee Nielsen chisel, which I use all the time now for things like are shown here, like when I'm making kumiko, I will use it with the jigs. I like it because it's kind of wide. So it's a nice, wide enough that you can push it down and it's a firm, it's a nice reference surface. So you don't have to worry about it wobbling or anything.
Right.
2, it is fairly heavy on the blade end, which means it's easier to keep it flat on a reference surface like a jig or a shoulder or something like that. So I like that as well. And also because the blade itself is kind of long. So when I have, say, like a kumiko jig in my vise, or if I just have, like I have a mitering jig that I also use it with, and it gets good clearance over all these things. So the handle never gets in the way.
Because you have a 1.5 or 2 inch wide chisel that you use a lot.
An 1.5 wide butt chisel, which I really like. That's what it is. A butt chisel.
I know. I'm still going to laugh.
Yeah. It's a BUT chisel, though. It's not
But chisel.
It's a butt, chisel, which I really like a lot. But the blade is shorter, and so it can be tricky to use at times because you run out of blade, and whatever you're working against, the reference surface starts to hit the handle or the ferrule. Mm-hmm. So it can be a little harder to use at times. So I like the Lee Nielsen. I've been going to that Lee Nielsen 1-inch chisel more often. So that's my all-time favorite tool.
I have a similar chisel. It's a Japanese chisel, but it's a fatty 1.5, 1.25, something like that, little short one. I tend to use Japanese chisels when I do kumiko.
But you're precious.
I'm sure yours turn out just fine.
But I remember when Philip Morley started, or posted a video of him doing kumiko, and he was using a block plane
blade. That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't believe neither one of you have done that now. Because both of you have expressed
I've been meaning to try it out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the reason I don't think I would do it a block plane blade is because it may not be long enough. Like the chisel, I can easily wrap my hand around and keep it flat and push it with that one hand while I hold the kumiko piece or the little, maybe a liner that I'm mitering with the other hand. And a plane blade, even say like a block plane blade, which would be like 1.5 inches wide. If it's not very long, I just think that would be kind of. I mean, I'll try it because really all you got to do is get it pushed down, and then you could probably just push it with your thumb across the reference surface, and it'll cut just fine. But I just think the chisel is easier to hold. There's more to hold there.
And block plane blade is never sharp enough to do it, and I never want to take the blade out of my block plane to do it, which means I'd have to get an extra blade. And then Philip said, well, that's just what I had. So it wasn't like a ringing endorsement, but it was still a really cool idea.
But I mean, like Garrett Hack, whenever he teaches, he travels all over the world to teach. He'll use, when he needs a wide chisel, he'll use a blade from his bevel up jack plane. Yeah. And it's not, I've seen that done a lot of, people using a plane blade as a chisel in various different situations, and it works fine. It's just, that's my favorite tool of all time this week is that chisel. Phillips is something different.
I think you've said that tool in the past as well, which is fine. I've repeated tools.
But the premise of the segment is not that you have to come up with a new tool each time. It's just what's your favorite tool right now.
For this week.
That's what it is. Week. And that's the tool I've been using a lot recently.
I'm not repeating a tool. I kind of am.
Because it's not even going to be a tool.
There's a challenge laid down. I'm not going to disprove you, but somebody out there is going to just listen to the episode where you said this one already.
Did I say this one?
I think you did.
With the new cutter head?
The name of the file was duct tape. I thought you were going to be doing duct tape.
Oh. God, now you made me blow my own favorite tool of the week. Never mind. You go, Ben.
Is it segmented cutter head?
It's up.
Yeah. So I got a sort of an old planer. It's a RC33 Delta Rockwell planer from the 80s. It's a beast. It's 13 inches wide, but it weighs probably like 400 pounds. It has the density of a black hole. And I really like the thing. But ever since I've started using planers with segmented cutter heads, they're so fantastic. So I would say probably for the past couple years, I've been debating, do I put a cutter head in this little old 30-year-old planer, or do I just upgrade to like a 15-inch planer with a segmented cutter head from Grizzly or Powermatic? And the price difference was, by the time I could sell my old planer, it was like close enough to say, why don't you just get a new planer? But I finally kind of bit the bullet, took my planer in to a shop, and had a segmented cutter head put in it. And again, I was kind of worried about throwing money at it because it was like really expensive. And for me personally, that meant it was really, really expensive. But the guy cracked the machine open and he said, "Has this thing ever been used? These gears are tight. This looks like a sewing machine in here." So that made me feel really good.
Which is kind of an insult. Did you even use this thing?
Yeah, well, actually, I was 30 years old, and the first 25 years didn't see a lot of use, probably. Not until I got it in my shop and heated and working every day. So, yeah, I guess it is fairly new. But that made me feel good that I wasn't throwing a lot of money into something I shouldn't have been. And I just got it in with some help from Ben back into my shop. Got it up and running. First cut, dead quiet, dead smooth, just zzz, like that. Perfect. Awesome. And
now, is the joiner next?
I don't know. Here's why. Number one, I never end up with a jointed surface on a finished board. Normally, I'll joint one side close to flat, hit it with the planer, flip it, hit it again. So normally the planer on surfaces is my last surface. The joiner, on the other hand, what I really do like it for is I'll try to get a glue joint right off the joiner if I can. Mm-hmm. And with those little scallopy knives, I've been told it's not a big deal, but there are scallops. They're really, really thin, but they take maybe a plane shaving or two to get rid of them if I'm planing a surface, which means, do I really want that as a glue joint? And yeah, I'm going to get less tear out if I go with a segmented cutter head on my joiner, but then again, am I hand planing every single glue joint beyond that point? I mean, now I probably hand plane probably less than a quarter I have to hit with a hand plane. I don't want to throw that away. So, and plus this was really expensive and I don't have any money. So, so I think I'm going to keep straight knives in the joiner.
But you didn't plan to do this either. All of a sudden, Mike, it was late one day and Mike just walks up and he goes, "I just bought a bird head for my planer."
I went
he was surprised he did.
Right. I was just walking down the street and boom, I bought a bird head.
No, like I went on a website because I always go to the same website and check the price periodically, maybe every couple months or so. And this time, like, it was gone. It's like, oh no, they stopped making it for this planer because it's 30 years old. Why are they still making cutter heads for this planer? And then I found it. I was like, oh no, it's not gone. But for some reason, there was this panic of, I better get it now before it goes. And I did. And I was in shock. And I went over to Ben. I just bought a cutter head for my planer. So some things happen that way.
Would you upgrade to a segmented cutter head for your joiner? If you had one on the planer already?
Yeah, because I think I might eventually do it for my joiner because of tear out, solely for tear out. And I don't mind edge planing because honestly, I don't. Mike and I make different things typically. So I actually edge joint almost everything if I'm going to do a glue joint, because when I'm edge jointing is shops on veneers or,
right,
you know, boards that are going to go together to make a panel for a box, where I want that joint to be as tight and smooth and clean as possible. So I always edge joint the stuff that I work, you know, I'm gluing up. So I would do that. Now, if I were making dining tables all the time, you know, with, you know, 7-8 foot long glue edge joints, I probably would not want to be, you know, hand planing that every time. So for me, I think it would come down to appearance then. It's like, does it look, because yeah, does it, I wonder how they look. You can't tell that they're scalloped once you glue them together. The edge joint, I would think.
No, I just worry about, is it going to come together? What if the scallops don't align? Is it going to be a perfectly square glue joint, even though the fence was square? Or is it just, I don't know. I mean, it's not like dead flush, like a hand plane joint. I mean, it's like flat. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, Raleigh said, nah, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. So I tend to trust what Raleigh Johnson says, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think I would. And also because with a 12-inch joiner, the knives are, you know, if you get a little nick or something in the knife, it's like, oh, now I got to live with that for how long?
I ain't changing them.
I mean,
Just move that fence over. There's a whole lot of real estate on a
right, I
12-inch
know.
joiner.
So, with a segmented cutter head, you can just rotate it. And also, they're carbide. My knives are not carbide. Carbide knives for my joiner are, for a set of them is going to set me back like $250 or something. And it's like, okay, well, how many sets of those do I buy before I've bought a segmented cutter head?
Right.
And it's not many. So I'd probably eventually one day I'd like to do a segmented cutter head for my joiner. But I'd get a planer first, I think, a new planer, because I would not put a segmented cutter head on my planer. It's they make one for it, but it's a benchtop planer, so I'm not, sinking $800 or whatever into that.
Into a $500 planer.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
All right. Well, my favorite tool of all time for this week is my toolbox, and I hesitated with this one because I'm not. It's like I've been working out of it for a month now, but I don't feel like it's done yet.
It's really cool looking.
It's cool. There's definitely some upgrades that need to happen. I'm not entirely pleased with the tool holding.
Got your little snappy straps on there, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm not happy with those. So I have for the listeners, I have a toolbox that opens up, both sides open up. It's like a bifold, if you will, that opens, and my hand saws and squares are mounted in one side, but when it's closed, they are upside down. So I have to have them fully
Really
secured.
secure.
I mean, they're really, really secure.
Yeah.
And especially my 12-inch Starrett it requires 2 levels of security. So there's leather straps. They're all in a block or a set of blocks with curves that hold them in. And then there's leather straps that snap down over them, and that holds everything in. But the Starrett didn't fit in the orientation that everything else is in. It has to be upside down. So then I've got these little hooks that hook the Starrett blade in.
Cool.
And it's awesome. But the snapping turns out to be, I have almost closed the lid with the snaps undone before. And if I did that, though, all of those tools are going to drop out onto everything else.
Cool. So that's like your PIN number plus the name of your first pet.
Yes.
Cool.
It is double level security.
Also, I noticed it's not made from ebony.
It is not made from ebony. No, I ran out of ebony. And
Such a disappointment.
yeah, I know. But no, this is leftover pine and some
It's
plywood.
a cool tool cabinet on a rolling stand. Is that milk paint?
That is milk paint, and there was a little mishap that if you listen to the podcast, you would have heard about.
Which podcast?
Ours.
Oh, this podcast. You mean an episode that I wasn't on?
Yeah, I wound up getting some steel wool shavings in the finish because I was painting it on. It was no big deal. I put stickers over it, whatever. But yeah, it's a cool little toolbox, and I'm really pleased with it so far. There's definitely upgrades to be made. But
Did you have sort of a master plan when it came to, like, I designed this thing, I knew where every tool was going before I built it, kind of a thing?
I had the planes somewhat laid out, and I knew that I wanted the chisel standing up
Right.
on edge. The idea behind this is I want everything open at all times. Just you open up the toolbox,
Yes.
and everything is just reach for it and grab it. No opening a drawer, no opening up a door after the fact. Everything is laid out, first order of retrieval, done.
'Cause there's nothing more onerous than opening a drawer
Man,
while you're woodworking.
I don't have time for that. I don't have time.
A drawer is definitely an upgrade than having to, like, remove a till or slide a till over 3 layers of tills and reach down to the bottom. So I like this access. The thing, mine has drawers, so my chisels are in a drawer, which is fine. But if there's one thing I would change, it would be to get my chisels standing straight up in a row at the back of the box when you open the lid like yours. I think that's really cool. And I'm sure you're just grabbing for those things all the time.
I do like the chisel arrangement.
Yeah. The only downside with this entire style is that I think the footprint is too large
When it's open?
when it's open. And in our bench room down at the shop, there's maybe 18 inches to walk between the cabinet and the bench, and this takes up about 16 of it. So it's just in that bench room, it's a little bit too large.
So what is your plan with the rolling cart underneath it?
Matt thinks it's not finished. He's not really liking the aesthetics of that just yet.
Yeah, I was gonna paint it and
No, not the
whatever.
aesthetics. I mean, what are you going to put in there? I mean, it's a big
actually,
open space.
so since this is this picture, I have a shelf in there with all my sharpening stuff, and I thought I would put a shooting board and bench hook and things down there. I might put my handsaw. I don't know. It's room to grow.
Do you plan on having this as sort of like your workstation when you get into your own shop?
No. And that's the other thing about it is like I put all this work into this toolbox that I don't think is going to be the end game when I get into my own shop. This is perfect for our shop where it's like sometimes I'm working at another bench, sometimes in the other room. I can roll everything around. I don't think that this is what I would pick if I wasn't in a communal shop.
I mean, so first of all, when you get your shop up and running at home, all of this is just going to stay at the fine woodworking shop, and you will buy new tools for your shop.
That's tough. That sort of mixed shop,
Yeah,
that's the worst.
you got to have two sets of tools, Ben.
Yeah.
So you can make a new toolbox for your place.
And buy all new tools.
That one can have drawers.
What you have to do at least once, even if you don't need it, you have to sign up for another woodworking class just to take this into the class. Boom, open that sucker up, and everyone's going to be like,
Ooh,
wow.
look at the leather.
Look at Mr. Fine Woodworking with his fancy rolling tool cabinet.
Well, I actually built it with the intention of bringing it to the chair class I took. And because I was like, oh, it'd be nice to have my tools, bring all my tools in case I need something. And I didn't get anywhere near done.
And it's also probably like, yeah, you're not going to use any of these tools when you make a chair.
Yeah, no. Not really. Not really. I've got a spoke shave in there now that I would have brought, but that's about it.
Yeah, that kind of fits in your pocket, though.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this about a shelf. Because you said you built a shelf. If I were you, I would put a drawer, like a top drawer, well, for your sharpening stuff. Because shelves get dusty. Things knock around on them. Mm-hmm. I'd put a drawer. Then I'd put some more drawers in that base and put other stuff in them.
For some reason, I hadn't thought of drawers in that base.
A drawer is nothing but a lipped shelf that pulls out so you can access it easily.
Deep thoughts.
That actually sounds pretty nice to me. It's like, yeah.
Burn. All right, let's move on. Next question is from Bill. This one's a deep one. I don't really understand the sharpening process from start to finish and what tools are needed along the way. There's a lot of information about individual tools, water stones, grinders, sandpaper, etc., but not a lot of clear explanation connecting the sharpening process as a whole. Could you please talk about the general sharpening process, say for a chipped versus new hand planes? Chip blade versus new hand planes.
Well, first off, there is tons of sharpening information, probably too much. Either that or not enough context between all the different techniques. So rather than reading 20 articles, go read one article and follow that process. In fact, I would start with an article by Dana Bulchowski, who's the demo and sharpening guru at Lee Nielsen Tools, because Lee Nielsen wants you to be really happy with their tools when you buy them because you're going to pay a lot of money. And you're only going to like them if they're sharp. So Deneb has a sharpening system that he demonstrates and wrote an article on it for us that says, do this and you'll be sharp and it will work. And so start there, do the whole thing A to Z, and you should be good. And then now you're going to have some context about what goes into sharpening. And then you can start to mix and match either products or processes, and you can get going. So what Deneb recommends for like the grinding process, which is, typically on edge tools, you have two bevels, a primary bevel, which is just usually, it's just really coarse right off of a grinder or coarse sandpaper or coarse diamond plate. And then you kick it up a few degrees so you're honing just the edge. So you're moving a really small amount of steel to get sharp. So that primary bevel is only important in that it keeps your honing area really, really small. So if it gets too wide, you got to go back to grind, once in a while. The cheapest way and the slowest way is really coarse sandpaper or really coarse diamond plate. Coarse sandpaper, probably, I think, get 100 grit sandpaper, stick it to like a glass plate or something, or a piece of granite, and have fun. Your fingers are going to get hot. It's going to be really boring, but it's going to do the job accurately and safely. Get a high-speed grinder, otherwise known as a low-speed grinder for some people. A low-speed, high-speed grinder with a friable wheel, some sort of a little tool holder thing that works really, really fast. It's hard to get a really true bevel, and you risk bluing or taking the temper out of the steel, and then you can move up to like a Tormek or a truly slow speed water wheel grind where it's very, very accurate, much faster than doing it by hand, not quite as fast, but no risk. But it's tremendously expensive. Yeah. So pick your poison. There's downsides to every single thing, and it's probably the most difficult thing to recommend for people. Like, well, how do I get that grind, or how do I take a chip out? Well, do you not have a lot of money? Do you not want to make an investment? Do you want to do it really quick? Do you have a ton of money and you want to do it really well and really accurately? Pick one of those three.
So maybe the easiest way of thinking about it for somebody just trying to get the concept and understand the processes is instead of talking about tools or dividing it up into tools, is to divide it up into, you need to get a primary bevel. And then you need to get a secondary bevel. However you get that primary bevel, you could do this, or this, so primary bevel, you've got sandpaper, high-speed, slow-speed grinder, wet grinder.
Yes.
Secondary bevel.
Waterstones.
Next.
When I'm teaching, and I always end up having to teach people how to sharpen, I'd say there's three things you have to do when you to sharpen. The first thing you do, and fortunately you really only have to do it once, is flatten the back and polish it. You do have to maintain the polish as you go along, but that's not a big deal. But you do that. You flatten the back and you polish it. You have to have a way to do that. Then you have to maintain the primary bevel, and you have to have a means to do that. And then you have to hone a secondary bevel. You don't have to, but you have to hone the cutting edge. And for me, that means honing a secondary bevel. You have to have a means to do that. So there's three things you have to do, and you have to have a way to do each one of them. And then I talk about the different methods that are available to do them. But the point that I always make is that you pick one sharpening technique, and that's it. Do not deviate from it. Do not try something else and then go back and then try a third one. Pick one thing to do and then do it, because they all work, except for Scary Sharp. It does not work at all. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It works fine.
Scary Sharp meaning sandpaper
on glass.
Glass or granite, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, and they all work. So pick one and learn it, because if you're using one of them and it's not working,
Except diamond paste.
Except diamond paste. That doesn't work? Is that what you're saying? It does work.
I took a picture this morning just to prove you wrong, my friend. Forgot to show it to you.
But then, so that's the fundamentals of sharpening, is these three things. You have to have a method to do each one. And what I would say is pick something that makes sense together. Like if you're going to do Scary Sharpening for your honing, you might as well do it for maintaining the bevel too. Use sandpaper and granite. Then the other thing I try to explain to students is that when you are honing, every time that you go back to hone your blade, you want to make sure that you work all the way back down to the cutting edge first. So that's why you have to go back to 1,000 grit stone and make sure you raise a burr with that all along the edge before you move up to your other stones. So because a sharp edge is really the meeting of two planes on two surfaces at a point. So, and they have to be mirror polished, both of them. So that's that's the sharpening in a nutshell.
That's the theory, yeah.
And then there's all these different ways that you can do it, and they all work. So pick one technique. Denims is great, and then just do it.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, it's not the technique, it's not the medium that you're using, it's you. So practice some more. That's the truth, though, right? I mean,
yeah. No, and I jumped around from medium to medium multiple times, and then when I came here, it was like, no. Yeah, I think you and I went to the shop one day and I was like, just do this. And I was like, all right. And you proved the results to me. I was able to feel a sharp blade in a hand plane, you know?
The words is just do this, not diamond paste.
Ben has gone to diamond paste recently.
And even just this morning, because my Shapton stones, they're working great. I'm getting incredible edges off them and everything. And then there's just reasons why I wanted to switch, which isn't important right now, right?
It had nothing to do with me.
So are you using diamond paste in addition to your Shapton stones?
You're doing the Boggs method.
I'm doing the Boggs method.
Which he's the mad scientist genius of woodworking. So if Brian Boggs says diamond paste, you can't argue with this.
Yeah. So, but even this morning, it's just like, am I getting as good of results as I was? And because I've changed a lot about it, but I only changed it after I was getting great results consistently with Waterstones and Shapton, So it wasn't, the Shaptons work. There's no ends, ifs, or buts about that, but there were things that I wanted different. And, so this morning, I got the wispiest little end grain ash shavings off of a freshly honed blade, freehand sharpened on diamond paste, and it was like, that was the proof to me.
Is it hollow ground?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the key. If you're gonna freehand sharpen,
I didn't even want to mention it. I didn't even want to mention
and that goes back to how do you get your primary grind.
Yeah.
Depends how you're going to get your secondary little bevel on there. So,
but breaking it up into those three distinct elements, I think is great. Man.
That was well said.
Yeah. So, but I hesitate to even talk about diamond.
But to your point, Ben, and which was sort of Matt's point, is you get good at something so you know what you're shooting for. You know what your target is. Then you try another method, and you just see how long and how much difficulty it takes to get to that target. And then you can assess that system based on your other system.
Yeah.
But if you stop before you get good, it doesn't make sense to switch to something else if you don't know, again, what you're shooting for.
Yeah,
what
because
sharp is.
all of these methods have somebody reputable backing them up.
Sure.
So,
well, that's because they all work. Mm-hmm. You have to pick one and learn it and be able to and actually make the blade sharp using, because you can use all of them and get super polished blades and they're not sharp because you didn't get down to the point where it needs to be. So,
and that's the point.
That's the point of sharpening.
And on that point, I would like to talk about Audible sponsoring this episode. And I listened to Nick Offerman's Good Clean Fun. And I don't know if it was Jeff that recommended it or my wife was like, hey, she was poking around on Audible and she saw this book. And I was like, oh, I'd thumbed through it in the office one time and projects and things like that. I was like, what is an audiobook version of this going to be like?
Yeah.
It's incredible because it's Nick Offerman reading it. And I mean, that's all you really need to know. But this book, listening to it, I've been listening to it while I've been setting up my shop at home. It's an awesome book, and it just kind of gets back to what's fun about woodworking, what he loves about woodworking, and people who inspire him to get out in the shop and try different things in the shop, and just woodworkers that he looks up to and why. And I mean, the text alone would be fantastic, I'm sure. But Nick Offerman reading this text is phenomenal. It's a great listen. It's like 6 hours long. I really, really recommend it. I really recommend it for someone who, if you're going on a car ride with someone and they're interested in getting into woodworking or something like that.
Or if they're really boring and you don't want to talk to them.
That's why Jeff was trying to push an audiobook on me on the last car ride.
Jeff's like, hey, let's listen to this on the next trip.
But it was a great book, and it like kind of reminded me, because we we live and breathe woodworking all day.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like it's easy getting into the little minutia. And this was a nice way for me to step back and be like, oh yeah, I remember the first time I felt sharp, a sharp hand plane, or I remember that, and just going back through it.
Is a non-woodworker going to be able to listen to this and say, oh, that's pretty cool?
I think so. Like, I think I would have been able to listen to this with my wife in the car, and she would have been able to follow along.
Okay.
But it was still interesting to a woodworker.
Sure. That's
so
cool.
It's a nice happy medium, I think.
Do they have his other books on Audible?
I think so.
Because everyone should listen to Gumption.
Okay.
The chapter on Tom Lee Nielsen, specifically these several paragraphs about me. I'm going to get it, and I'm going to keep it in my car. And I'm going to play that for people when they're in my car.
He is. All right, so head on over to audible.com/shoptalklive, and if you want, you can listen to this book for free or any other book in their catalog.
I'm driving up to Maine next week for a photo shoot, and I'm going to get good clean fun, because I've read parts of it too in the office, and in his other book Gumption, and his other books. So I think I'll get one.
Well, if you head over to audible.com/shoptalklive,
I'll get it for free.
You'll get it for free.
Really?
Yeah.
Could I get the new Dan Brown book
Yes, you could.
for free?
Yes, you can.
Because I'm going to Virginia on Friday.
Although you already...
Do you like Dan Brown?
You're already an Audible customer, so I don't know.
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, head on over to audible.com/shoptalklive for a free audiobook of your choice.
Yeah. I mean, it's like once you commit to an author, you got to keep reading those books.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Dan Brown, right? Come on.
Yeah.
Dan Brown. Come on, the hero of his books is something called a symbologist. Give me a break.
Matt is finding new ways to annoy our audience.
All right,
Always on the cusp right there.
It's not woodworking anyways. Let's move on. People don't want to hear us talk about stuff that's not woodworking.
All right. Question number 4. I've been trying some spoon carving after reading Peter Galbert's excellent article last year. The tools he uses are recommended for green lumber. What exactly is green wood? If I cut a 3-inch branch, would it still be considered green a month later? Is there anything I can do to keep my lumber green longer, like sealing in plastic wrap or a garbage bag? From Sheldon.
You're the greenwood guy these days, Ben.
Yeah, Ben.
Come on.
Give us a moisture content level.
Above 12. I don't know.
Well, I know, like, if you go to a box store, not a home center, pardon me, and you purchase construction grade lumber, I would not be surprised if some of it was 20% or more. And I would say that's not green lumber.
Well, it could have been kiln dried, but then just stored outside to where it got all rained on and wet again.
Yeah, but not all of it's kiln dried. Some of it seems to be just...
How is it not kiln dried?
I don't know, because they sell some that's clearly marked as kiln dried, and then others that's not marked as kiln dried.
But yeah, put it in a bag, right? And it's going to be fine.
No.
Yeah.
What?
No,
It'll get moldy.
It'll get moldy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to stay wet.
It'll stay. Well, okay, so...
And then when you're going to turn it, and all that mold will just go flying off, and I'm sure that there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I have one of those like food saver vacuum sealers I put my smoked salmon in when I make it. You could put like a thing in there, get all the air out. It's not going to get moldy, right?
I don't know. But, I mean, all right, so let's break this down. What exactly is green lumber? It's lumber that is, or wood that has just been cut down. That still has high moisture content.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I would say it's freshly cut, and it's pretty freaking heavy because it's got so much water in it.
But if I cut down a branch, is it going to be green a month later? Well, it depends how long the branch is. If the branch is 6 feet long, a month later, the 3 feet in the middle is going to be green. I mean, there's no way of really definitely answering, is a 3-inch branch going to be cut down? It's going to be green a month later.
How green?
It's all relative.
Just say yes.
How green
Yes,
does it have to be to carve it?
It doesn't, and that's the other thing. You can do all of these techniques on dried wood, on kiln dried wood. I mean, you can carve dry spoons.
I would think that. So when I was working with a turner named Mike Mahoney in California, he's a big time turner, right? And you would think, okay, so he's always turning green wood. Well, we needed some wood for one of the articles, so we jumped in his truck and we drove to another part of his property, and he had just a bunch of Claro walnut logs, and he just cut off a chunk. And they obviously been sitting there a long time, but the thing was is that it was air dried. So he went, that's what he went in and turned. It still wasn't as dry as furniture lumber, for example. It wasn't that low, but you rough turned it and let it dry, and then you went back. So I would think for carving, it doesn't have to be sopping wet green wood, right?
Dry wood is just not as fun and a little bit more difficult to carve. That's all.
I would think air dry would be easier than kiln dried.
Yes. But even, so most of the time when I'm carving spoons, I'm just digging through my firewood pile. And when I got the firewood, it was really fun to carve. Now a year later, it's not as fun, but I can still carve a spoon out of it. There's no reason I can't carve a spoon out of it. It's just the moisture content's lower and it's more difficult to carve.
I would just say every time you want to carve a spoon, cut a tree down.
Yeah.
Or go to IKEA and buy a spoon for $1.50.
Right. Go to Target and get a spoon.
But the big thing is to keep it dry longer, or to keep it green longer, is to keep the wood as large as you can for as long as you can. If you're going to do a bowl, just cut off enough for that bowl.
What, Mike, you were talking about somebody who...
Yeah.
Jenny Alexander, right? Submerges... Yeah. Is that what?
Yeah, we did a chair making class where you're literally splitting the parts out of a section of a log, and she would just literally keep them submerged in her yard. Like an underground cistern or something.
A cistern.
So, so you just keep it underwater. Yeah. And if there's no oxygen, it isn't going to get moldy, I don't think.
Dave Fisher will, when he's working on something, keep it, after something's been split out, he will keep it in a plastic bag. But if you keep it in a plastic bag for too long, it will get moldy.
Okay.
So sometimes as he's working on a piece and he doesn't want to immediately dry out, he will wrap it in a towel, and that will, absorb the moisture, but keep some of the moisture in the towel as he's working on it. So don't be afraid of whether this piece is green still or not. Just dig in. I wouldn't worry about it. So should we do a deep dive, or should we answer another question?
Oh, we can do a deep dive.
Well, you guys wanted to talk about drawer fitting more.
Yeah. So that was when we were going to talk about how to fit a drawer.
Yeah.
I really don't know if I have anything to say about that.
Here's an insight I just sort of came across, is that, okay, so when I make furniture, all the joints kind of tend to stick out. All the surfaces are offset where they meet. But I thought, well, a drawer, no, that's all like perfectly square and flush. Well, yeah, the dovetails are flush on the sides, so the thing opens and closes. But then all the edges, I kind of came to realize they're all offset from each other for really specific reasons. And I thought that was kind of cool. So it's like, so on a drawer front. So basically, if people talk about, a dovetail drawer, they think, you made it out of dovetails. Yeah, that's kind of neither here nor there how it's made. I think what's really important is, does it work really well? Does it function well? Does it slide without rattling and not sticking? Is it really smooth? So for me, the fitting of the drawer is, I think, much more important than how you go out making it. You can make it with rabbet joints pinned or even nailed together, who cares? But so for me, the drawer front, it all starts with the drawer front, and it sounds counterintuitive, but I always start with a really, really tight fit side to side. Because if a drawer racks when you open and close it, it's because it's too skinny side to side. So, and then conversely, top to bottom, you have to have some room for wood movement. Otherwise, it's going to stick when it gets humid. So that kind of goes without saying. But then in terms of the offset, so the bottom of the drawer front is actually inset from the bottom of the sides. So it's never contacting either the drawer stretcher or the sides of the drawer, any in-case part. So it's only writing on the sides. And then I picked this up from Steve Latta, because I used to flush the top of my drawer sides with the top of the drawer front. Steve Latta always kicks his drawer sides down a little bit.
How much?
I don't know. I want to say he might do like a 16th. I do more like a 32nd, just so I can feel it. that it just keeps things from sticking if it gets too humid. And then if the drawer front sticks a little bit, you can always plane that down without messing up the sides. And then the other thing Steve does is he recesses the top of the drawer back down from the sides. So as you're pulling the drawer out and it tilts down a little bit, if the back is the same height as the sides, it can scrape along the top and you get that horrible little scraping noise. You don't know where it's coming from. It's usually from the drawer back scraping along the top of the drawer box. So he insets that down. Then, of course, the back is also inset from the bottom of the sides to give you room to slide in the bottom. So it's this really weird, asymmetric, non-lined up thing that you make in order to work really well. So it's like, oh, cut a dovetail, now I can make a drawer. It's like, nah, kind of two different skill sets.
Yeah, because I mean, a dovetail drawer that doesn't open is pointless.
You can't see the dovetails.
Right.
The thing that's I've never thought about that or heard of that before, stepping the pieces down. But the other thing is then it takes out the variables when fitting the drawer.
Right. There's really nothing left, almost nothing left to fit except for the width and the drawer front after it's put together.
Right.
You know, so it does make it a lot easier to fit the drawer, but it necessitates probably a change in how you construct the drawer, right? Because, I mean, I always think about drawer fitting as really starts when you begin to construct it. Because, like, the first thing, like you said, you have to do is you have to fit the drawer front to the opening. And how well you do that will ultimately it can control how well your drawer fits into the pocket, you know?
Yeah.
So you have to start with that and make sure that, like you said, you want it tight lengthwise, side to side, but you know, top to bottom, it can have a little bit of a gap already because you're going to need a gap there anyways.
Right.
So you have to, the way you construct it, you have to, as you're building it, you have to think about what am I doing and how is this going to affect my ability to fit the drawer. So, you know, like, you know, by making the sides a little bit shorter than the front, right there, you're not going to have to worry about the sides rubbing the top of the drawer pocket. Mm-hmm. And then you make the drawer back a little bit shorter. You don't have to worry about that, like you said. So for me, it always starts with how I construct it. So, for example, I work at a smaller scale than you do, and I know that this is probably not a concern for you, but for me it is that my drawer sides are going to be normally a 1/4 inch thick, sometimes even 3/16. So I can't really shave too much off them. So what I often do is start
thickness-wise.
Yeah, thickness-wise, okay, when I'm fitting the sides.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that I have to make I start off with drawer sides that are a little bit thicker, and I leave them proud, and I start off with drawer sides a little bit thicker, and let's say if I want a 1/4 inch side, I might actually set them in when I dovetail them, make them so the drawer sides are initially a little bit more than a 1/4 inch because I know that I'm going to hand plane off the sides a little bit to make that drawer slide because my drawer front is tight, right? So, so in order to end up with exactly a 1/4 inch side, because I can't take too much off because then that groove for the bottom down there, that starts to get weak.
Right.
So there's all this process thinking that I have to go through to ensure that my drawer fits, but also that I haven't ended up with a drawer that's too thin anywhere, you know, too weak. So,
for you, there's no, okay, I'm going to fit this drawer now. The fitting starts when you begin construction.
Yes.
There's no isolate, because I've always thought, okay, well, I've got the drawer built, now let's make it fit. And my drawers show it.
Your drawers what?
They show it. They don't fit very well because it, you know, the step down idea that makes sense to me, and I love the idea of taking out variables in fitting. You know, because I have absolutely been planing away at the side of a drawer when it turned out it was the top of the drawer that was rubbing. Mm-hmm. You know, things like that. So I love the idea of taking out variables, but especially at a small scale when you have to start fitting at the beginning.
Well, yeah, I think that's what you do. I mean, you fit the front, and then I'll make the back. And the back initially will be the exact same dimensions as the front, height and everything. It just makes it easier to make it. So, and then I'll cut that, and I'll use a shooting board to make sure that those two things are exactly the same length. Mm-hmm. And then I'll do my sides, and I'll make sure that the sides are the same height initially as the front.
Okay.
Then I'll cut my grooves. I know a lot of people don't cut their grooves till after they do the dovetails, but I like to cut my groove first, and then I cut my dovetails. And I think that if I were making, but see now, if I were to make a drawer the way that Mike said, I don't know. What I would probably do is cut my groove, and then I would cut my sides short, and then I'd cut my back to its final height as well, so that when I start to do things like lay out tails and all that, I don't have to worry about, I'm going to cut this down a 1/16 of an inch later.
Right. No, everything starts exactly the same width. The drawer front, drawer sides, drawer back. Everything exactly the same. So you're right. So for cutting joinery, you're not worrying about offsets when you're cutting the joints.
So do you
take it down after the fact.
So you do the dovetails, then you take those parts down and then glue them up.
But what I'm saying, if they all start the same width, right, and you're going to then take it down, say, a 1/16 of an inch later on that top. So that means when I lay out my tails, I have to remember, okay, I'm going to take it off a 1/16, and then I want a half pin that's, let's say, 3/32 or whatever, an eighth of an inch. That means I actually need to come in 3/16 of an inch.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's not crazy. But you're right. The scale I work at, I don't take that into consideration.
Right, because it's not an issue for you, but for me, a 1/16 of an inch is a lot of material.
Throw things off.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's that, because often my half pins are a 1/16 of an inch at their narrowest part. Because
you should make bigger stuff.
But so fitting a drawer starts when you make the parts. That's when fitting a drawer starts.
Yeah. One time you talked about putting the drawer in backwards.
Well, that's what Mike said. What I was going to say to you, because you said, the drawers don't fit well. And what I had said to you was, when I'm fitting drawers, there's never a back on the cabinet. And I always turn the cabinet around and I watch the drawer going in, because you can see then what's rubbing.
If it gets stuck.
Yeah, you can see where it's hitting, and then sometimes I might put a pencil in there and just mark that area, or it might just be the entire back edge of the top of the top edge of the back needs to come down.
Right.
So you can see where it's hitting, and that'll also help you see things like, might help you diagnose that. And actually, what's really the problem here is that there is glue in that corner down there, or there's like a ridge from my planer blades or whatever, and I need to get rid of that, because that's what's causing the fit problem.
Or you glue in your drawer guides so they're not perfectly parallel, or it's a solid wood case side and there's a slight bow to it and it's stuck in the middle. It's all these things. I mean, I would probably say at least half of the way the drawer fits is building the pocket for the drawer well to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Which is great. Okay, so we just talked a half an hour on getting sharp. Then we talked 20 minutes on getting a sharp blade into a shoulder plane.
But yeah, actually fitting a drawer doesn't start with making the parts of the drawer. It starts when you're making the case.
Yeah.
Because you want that pocket to be square.
Yeah.
And you don't want any bow, any sag, or anything anywhere. Because if it's square, all of a sudden, all you have to do is make a square drawer.
Yes.
If it's not square and you have to make some wonky, crazy, bleep, bleep, bleep drawer,
bonk, bonk, bonk,
bonk, bonk, bonk, it becomes a lot harder.
Yeah. The only thing harder than making a perfectly square drawer is making a drawer intentionally out of square in a specific way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it really starts when you're making the case of, whatever it is. So, and then really it starts when you're selecting your lumber at the and you're milling your lumber, you got to make sure it stays flat. So, and you're cutting your joinery for your, your dados or whatever. It all starts then. You got to be thinking about the end thing. As soon as you pick your lumber, you have to be thinking about what the end is and how what I'm about to do now will affect what I'm going to do the rest of the time I'm constructing this piece of furniture or this box or what have you.
I think that's almost horrible advice.
No, this is good.
But no, it's good advice for Matt Kenny. But if I am at the lumber yard thinking about how my drawer's going to fit, I'm never going to build anything. So take all that with a grain of salt. I
don't literally think about how my drawer is going to fit, but I am thinking, okay, what I want is wood that's going to be stable, and flat, and easy to work.
But which applies for the entirety of a project,
right?
Yeah, that's a general theme in lumber selection.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, it just becomes a mighty big bite at some point.
So I know we're probably running over, but here's one of the things that I notice about people who are just starting woodworking and where they run into problems, because what they do, and this is perfectly natural to do, because you haven't yet mastered your tools and you haven't yet mastered joinery and things like that. So what you think about is, okay, now I got to cut some dovetails. And you get hyper-focused on cutting dovetails, and that's all you're thinking about is cutting dovetails. And you think, okay, well, I cut those dovetails. Now I got to glue this thing together. And so you end up focusing on one thing at a time without thinking about the overall context of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so people just go from step to step to step, and you end up with things. It somewhat becomes disjointed, I think. And so because they're not keeping their eye on the overall goal of what they're doing. And so they run into problems that way, because instead of I'm making a piece of furniture, it's I'm cutting a dovetail joint. I'm fitting a drawer. Mm-hmm. I'm making a knob for the drawer, or I'm making a door. Well, I'm really just cutting a mortise and tenon. So it becomes this disjointed step-by-step thing rather than sort of a holistic process. I don't.
Yeah, it's hard. It's necessary. It's like cooking. When I was first learning to cook, I followed recipes and all these ingredients and all these steps over and over, step by step by step, with no context of what I was actually doing in the big picture.
Right.
And the more I learned about the basic concepts, the more you could look at a recipe and say, oh, you're just sauteing, you're deglazing, you're, et cetera, et cetera. And that just happens. I think the great thing about woodworking is, we can go really, really deep, but the good thing is you can just go and make something, and you'll make it, and it'll be fine. And that's really cool. And it might be maybe 95% of what you kind of want it to be, but then that next 5%, that'll take you like 30 years to get there. So it's like the bar is pretty low for entry, but you're never going to get bored. You're never going to say, wow, mastered that. What do I do now? It's like, no. You can just
There's more.
Keep on going.
I was teaching my kids to make bread, and often, one of my sons in this class where he's learning to cook, right? And he's all focused on it's got to be this much this much that, and I make bread, and I'm like, well, no, the bread in the end has to feel like this, and how much flour I add in, I don't know. Because I want my bread the dough to feel like this.
But when you're first starting out, some flour is not a good ingredient.
No, I need 3/4 of a cup of flour.
Yeah. So
I understand that, but when we're doing it, I say, okay, I made them all of my kids, 2 of them, both of them. I was like, feel that, touch that. Do you feel how smooth that is? Do you feel how you're not sticking to it? You feel how that's what dough should feel like. And so if that means you have to add more flour, add more flour. If you need to add a little bit more water, add more water. And woodworking is the same way. What you want to end up with is a square cabinet, for example. So you have to think about that as you're doing all these different things. I want a cabinet that's going to be square. And what do I need to do at this point to end up with a square cabinet? Because you can't just cut a dovetail joint. You got to make sure the dovetail joint ends up square and all that stuff, right? So, anyways.
No, it's all great advice. The important thing is just get out there and build something.
Yeah, even if it's horrible. The next thing you build won't be as horrible.
Yep. I'm hoping.
I mean, everybody makes mistakes. It's not a big deal.
All right. You know what? Did we all come up with recommendations? Are we going to do that still?
I have a recommendation I could give.
All right.
You know, so Bessie Uniclamps would be my recommendation. They are awesome K-body clamps. They're not heavy duty, but they come in like a 12-inch size, and they are perfect for drawers, unless you're making a monster drawer. But like small drawers, they're perfect for that. Plus, they're parallel jaw clamps, which is awesome, and they're reasonably affordable. I can usually find them on, if you wait and watch Amazon, you can find them for about $17 a pop, and for a 12-inch one, and they're really, I use them all the time. So I said Uniclamp, right? That's what they're called, Uniclamp. You know the ones I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They're not the gray. Are they the gray ones? Or the red?
Yeah.
They're not gray jaw anymore. They used to have gray jaws. Now they have black jaws.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to recommend Olfa Snap Knife. Michael Fortune turned me onto this. You get it in the paint section of Home Depot. That's like the only place. I think he even said paint section of Home Depot in America. Like, I don't think you can get them again.
Olfa?
Yeah, Olfa, O-L-F-A. And it's actually what Tim Rousseau uses as a marking knife, and Michael Fortune and Peter, and but I lost my marking knife somewhere. It's in my truck, I think. And so I went out, $10, got this. It's fantastic. Wound up getting a second one.
One of the first times I worked with Michael, he was like, "Have you seen my kniff?" And I was like, "What is this guy talking about?" And he was like, "Oh, I love my kniff." And he was like, and I was like, "It must be some weird brand." And then I realized he was just being a goofball and saying knife.
He's a goofball.
In a Canadian way. So, anyways.
I didn't warn you about this one. Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I do. You probably need a new can opener. Just go buy a new can opener.
Mike wins.
Yeah.
I was teaching in Indiana, and, it's there for a whole week. I don't want to eat out the whole time. So I had some food in my hotel, and I didn't have a can opener. So I was at Target. It was a really nice Target with the groceries and everything. Okay, bought a can opener. And then I just brought it home, and then I just stuck it in the drawer. And then my daughter used it and goes, "Oh, my God, you got a new can opener. This is awesome." And it's true. No matter how nice your can opener is, it's going to wear out. So
get a new one.
Get a new one.
What kind of food were you eating?
Let's not. No. I don't want to picture Mike
was it like
alone in a hotel
beans?
room eating.
Was there a microwave in there? Please tell me
Yes.
you were heating up whatever it was, because
Yeah,
you were eating cold beans from a can.
Eating cold spaghetti out of the can. That's
Cold
what I pictured.
SpaghettiOs.
SpaghettiOs.
Well, that's all for this episode of
That's
Shop
gross.
Talk Live.
It's gross. It's ketchup and pasta.
I'm going to read the ad now, so hush. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it. With an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more, you'll find what you're looking for. Get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial today by signing up at www.audible.com/shoptalklive. And don't forget to head over to finewoodworking.com/sweepstakes and sign up for our hand tool month giveaway. Please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. Shop Talk is dependent on your questions, so make sure to send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop.
We're done.
That was a two-carter, huh?
Yep.
I can just
First
imagine
time ever.
Mike sitting on the side of the edge of the bed in
Oh,
his
that was
Carhartt
sad.
shirt and Carhartt underpants, just eating cold baked beans. Just
But those are the heavy canvas ones, right?
yeah.